Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the York Festival of Ideas. My name is Sia Shahandashti. I'm a senior lecturer here at the University of York at the Department of Computer Science, and I'll be chairing the event this afternoon. Thanks for joining us. This is my great pleasure to welcome you all here. Our speaker is Joe Tidy. Joe Tidy is the BBC's first ever cyber correspondent. That's interesting, and the foremost voice in the corporation on cybercrime and hacking. He has been covering all major cyber attacks over the past 6 years or so for the BBC, for BBC TV, radio, social media, and its website. He has made documentaries about cybersecurity for which he traveled all over the world to track down stories. And that's one of the things I was fascinated when I was reading this book that he has written. His most high-profile news feature and documentary involved his journey to Russia in 2021 in search of the world's most wanted cyber criminal. So Joe will be talking about his book, as I just showed you, the Ctrl Alt Chaos: How Teenage Hackers Hijack the Internet Tonight. Joe, welcome. And
Thank
do
you.
you want to say a few words about the book?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. And it's great to be here and great to talk to you. And it's really great that you will be doing the discussion as well, Sia, because you actually, you are one of the people in the world that knows a lot about cybersecurity and
Thank you.
cybercrime. And
Welcome.
thanks very much for reading the book as well. Yeah, the book has been, as is always the case, a labor of love for the last, I think it's just over 2 years now since I sort of, pitched it. And it came out last year, and I've been, talking about it at conferences and on podcasts and things ever since.
Right. Yeah, and I very much enjoyed reading the book. Um, I felt you have done extensive research for this book. I mean, that was impressive. How did you get into this sort of the world of cybercrime? If
Yeah,
you
well,
can.
well, as I sort of talk about in the beginning, in the sort of the preface, it all started for me in 2014 when there was a
Mm.
massive hack by teenagers, and it was at Christmas time, and it was the Lizard Squad hack, and it was carried out by these kids, and in fact, I've got a slide I can show you of of the Lizard Squad logo, which you may or may not remember. Do you remember this logo, Sia? So
Didn't it
if you're
become a
watching,
meme on the web?
yeah, it was like this was the Lizard Squad logo,
I
and
see.
they were infamous online, and they had this Twitter account which they used to brag about their attacks. And in 2014 at Christmas time, they hacked Xbox Live and PlayStation 1,
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Xbox Live and PlayStation Network. And they carried out an enormous and very successful DDoS attack, which brought these services, to their knees. So no one could play with their mates online. No one could download new games or register their new consoles at Christmas. And it was an enormous story. And I was at Sky News and I was covering sort of general reporting with an interest in tech. I've always been interested in technology news, and I was sort of given this task to go off and do the story. And I learned about cyber the hard way. I was thrown into the deep end, and they said, "Well, get me one of these lizards on air tonight," was the challenge. And I've got a picture of the lizard I did manage to get on air. Here he is. This is Julius Kivimaki. So he was 17 at the time. As you can see, they're calling himself Ryan. And that one interview with him really did sort of set me on this path of geekdom ever since. I've been obsessed with cyber ever since I interviewed that kid. Just I found it amazing, the kind of like nihilism and arrogance, and also the power and disruption that can be yielded, with a keyboard and mouse from these kids thousands of miles away. who don't even know each other in real life. They can come together and carry out these attacks, and it blew me away, really. And that is the reason why I'm here. That's the reason why I've written the book, because of that one story. And sometimes I think that's what can happen as a journalist. You're a general reporter, and then you get given an assignment which just can blow you away, and then you become a specialist. And that's what I've been doing now ever since that hack, really. Ever since 2014, I've been specializing in cyber.
I see. And Kivimaki is he's the sort of main character of your book, right? If you don't mind spoiling that for the audience.
Absolutely, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how did you get access to him? I mean, these kids are sort of in the dark web. How do you
Well, it's
get
funny
to
because yeah. So when I was given that task, get me a lizard on air, I was like, well, how on earth am I going to do that?
yeah, exactly.
These hackers are always anonymous and they're always hiding behind aliases. But what I learned, particularly about this type of cybercriminal, is they love the chaos, they love the anarchy, and they love
Mm,
the attention. So it wasn't easy to find this kid, but once I did, it didn't take a huge amount of persuasion actually to come and do a TV interview, and since then, I think there have been other cases where the cases of these teenagers sort of doing interviews with journalists, they're not that common. But what you
right.
do find with them is that they are out there shouting about their hacks quite often. Less so in the last few years. They're more in their own community, what they call the com, which is a bit away from the prying eyes of journalists and researchers. But certainly back in the last kind of 10 years or so, they are out there. And if you can persuade them, then they will talk.
I see. I see. So this is the guy behind that infamous sort of uh,
Mm.
Finnish attack, right? The was it the uh,
Vestamo?
yeah, exactly. So uh, mental health records of people, right?
Mm.
That
Mm.
yeah, I see. So do you find that sort of how did you find him when you talked to him? He was a teenager when you talked to him, right?
Yeah, so when I interviewed him for Sky News, he was only 17 at the time.
Mm,
And I had no idea that this kid was already kind of infamous in the cybercrime world.
I see.
I just thought he was, caught up in this DDoS attack at Christmas. But it turned out he was already on double police bail in Finland for various other cybercrimes. And I sort of like, I've always found Kivimaki as a character very, very interesting. But what happened, where are we now? 2026. So what happened almost 6 years ago now? Really, I just thought, hang on a minute, this is a character that I want to learn more about. And I sort of fell down the rabbit hole of researching this guy because
Mm,
what happened was he was linked to and accused of carrying out what I think is the cruelest cyber attack in history. As you say, the attack on Vestama, which is a massive chain of psychotherapists and psychiatrists in Finland. And he managed to get his way into that organization. The security was awful. He didn't even need a password, but once he did a scan and then got into the server of Vestamo, he was able to download all the data. So he took the usual sort of stuff we talk about all the time: names, username, email addresses, real life addresses, social security numbers, date of birth, all that kind of stuff, which is pretty serious already. But as you mentioned, it's mental health records as well,
mm,
and the way that he carried out the attack, the kind of steps that he took were pretty awful. And so the first thing he did was he got in. Then, of course, he tried to get money for the data. So he extorted the CEO of Vestamo. He wanted 400,000 euros worth of Bitcoin.
right.
Otherwise, he threatened to publish all this data on the internet. The CEO didn't pay. So then he carried out a really cruel, nasty step. He found 100 of the most sort of salacious records he could find in the data set, and he published them on the dark net. And then that was day one. Then day two, he published another one. Then day three, he published another one. Um,
Another
and then,
100.
yeah, so 100 each time,
Mm,
and he kept doing it to try and put the pressure on the CEO to pay. And
I
it
see.
became, as you can imagine, it became global news. But then what happened was he made an absolutely enormous error, which you read about because you read the book, but I won't go into it now. But he made a real doozy of a cybercrime mistake, which eventually led police to find him. But before they found him, He emailed all the patients of Vestamo and said, "I've got your data. Pay me, otherwise I'll publish your records online." And I've
Mm.
actually got, if you want to see it, I've got the email that he would have sent. So here it is. This is one of the victims of Vestamos. There were 33,000 people who had their data stolen, and she was one of them. She's called Tina Parika.
So he sent an email to every single one of them.
Yeah, I think it was only about 27,500 emails that were attached to those records, but he
Wow.
sent emails to all of them. I'll just read out the bits in yellow, which I think are the most kind of important bits. Dear Mrs. Parika, we have hacked into the medical records of Vestamo. We regrettably have to ask you to pay to keep your personal data safe. Send bitcoins to our address. If we do not receive our money even after this period, your details will be made available for all to see. And as I mentioned there, earlier, so you got name, address, telephone number. But this is the bit that really takes it to the next level, including the transcripts of your conversations with a therapist or psychiatrist. Yeah,
Mm.
we talk about data breaches all the time, don't we? But I can't think of anything worse. The information, I can't think of a worse piece of information than kind of what I tell my therapist to be in the hands of an extortionist. And
Yeah.
it's the impact on these people was absolutely enormous. And you've read the book. I'm telling you things you already know, but I'm just for the audience as
Good.
well. You haven't read the book yet, and I hope you will. I'd love you to read it. But the impact on these individuals was absolutely horrendous. These people were vulnerable. They were going to therapy. Not that therapy is something you only do if you've got problems. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's a healthy thing to do anyway. But a lot of the people had issues, mental health problems. They were admitting to their therapist, sexual fantasies, admitting crimes. Some of them were witness protection. Some of them were children. And then they received this email on a Saturday night, October the 26th, 2020. And as you'd have seen in the book, it's one of the lawyers who represents thousands of the victims. She has said in open court that at least two people killed themselves when they received that email.
Mm.
So that's why I call it the cruelest cyber attack in history, because I haven't found one. I mean, there's others that are pretty nasty, but that really was. I think it's the nature of the data that was stolen, and then the way that he released it on the dark net day after day, and then the way, as a Hail Mary to try and get paid, he
Yeah.
sent individual emails. You just don't see it very much, do you?
Yeah, I mean, this seems to be very different from sort of the early days of of hacking culture, where it was almost like a benevolent thing, right? And you talk
Yeah.
about this in your book as well. And I was really happy to sort of recognize at least one of the names in your book, the Chaos Computer Club from Germany.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys were doing hacking for other reasons, right?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think that when I did the book, I handed in the first draft, and the and my publisher said, "Yeah, it's great. You've told us, who, what, when, and where, but you haven't told us why. You haven't told us why this shift happened." And I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute. When did the shift happen from, as you say, like the Chaos Computer Club and Legion of Doom, Cult of the Dead Cow, Loft, all these groups, these kind of named teenage hacking groups, they had a very different ethos. They were largely about exposing bad code, embarrassing big tech. And famously, the Cult of the Dead Cow, which was like an American collective of young hackers, there was a branch of those guys called Loft. And what was fascinating about them was they were the kind of like the friendly face of the wider collective. So like most of the stuff that Cult of the Dead Cow did was kind of grey hat, the grey hat side of hacking. So in hacking you have black hat, which is like malicious and criminal. You have grey hat, which is sort of sometimes good, sometimes bad. Then you have the white hat hackers, which are like the ethical hackers. And Cult of the Dead Cow were kind of like grey slash, white. And then you've got Loft, which were like very much, no, we are the very responsible face of teenage hacking. And they were invited to the Senate in America to do a hearing about internet safety. And I just found that amazing, the kind of like the shift. You would never get some of these new gangs. Like I showed you the Lizard Squad logo. All these new gangs in the last kind of 10 years, no way would they ever be invited to the Senate to talk about internet safety.
Yeah.
And the
The only
ethos
person
was,
who wants to talk to them is the police.
well, exactly, yeah, yeah. And I think that culture of the kind of like late 1980s, early 90s, early 2000s, before this shift,
Mm.
was very different. And actually, in my book, and I've got it here if you want to see it, I
Yeah.
talk about this poem. This is called The Conscience of a Hacker, but it's mostly known as the Hacker Manifesto.
Mm.
And see, I know you recognize this, didn't you, from the book, but also even before the book. I'll just read the first bit because I think it's fantastic. So here it goes. Another one got caught today. It's all over the papers. Teenager arrested in computer crimes scandal. Hacker arrested after bank tampering. Damn kids, they're all alike. And it goes on. It's quite a long poem actually, but it's fantastic. And it really kind of caught this feeling in the hacker world of we are the good guys. Stop arresting us. We're just misunderstood. Actually, the mentor, who's a guy called Lloyd Blankenship, he wrote this because all his mates around him were being arrested, and he was getting
Mm.
so fed up with the police, sort of like treating them badly. So he wrote this poem, and it's really it's lasted the decades. This poem, people refer to it all the time. It's absolutely brilliant. But of course, that has gone. That kind of
Yeah.
ethos and morality has fallen away. In fact, I didn't know about the Hacker Manifesto until I was well in sort of research for my book, and I was talking to one of these teenage hackers from I think he was from might have been Lizard Squad. I can't remember which gang he was from, but he's kind of like still in the community, probably still doing some dodgy stuff. And I said I was chatting to him on Signal, and he said, "Have you heard of the Hacker Manifesto?" And he sent me the poem, and I read it, and I thought, "Wow!" And I sent back. I remember I said, "Do you feel like that? Then do you feel like that's what hacking is like for you?" And he said, "Not really. It's just a cool poem. I don't think any of this stuff really stands today,"
I
which I've
see.
always thought is a very interesting, perspective, and kind of proves the point that that Hacker Manifesto has long been forgotten by these kids. Maybe not forgotten, but long since ignored in terms of the morals.
Yeah, I see. I mean, it sort of proves your point that you're making in your book of this cultural shift as well, right? So,
Mm,
I what I found very interesting was this sort of this two-dimensional way of looking at this, which is sort of one dimension is evil versus good, and the other dimension was sort of lawful versus chaotic, I think, if I remember correctly
that's
from
right.
Doug Song. And that's you talk about sort of a few of these groups, how where they would
Mm,
fit basically in these sort of quadrants, if you like.
yeah.
Um, um, and this shift seems to be from sort of more good and lawful hackers to evil and chaotic hackers, or
Mm.
at least the way I understood it. Is that a fair characterization?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. So what? Yeah, what you're referring to is like a matrix. Where you get like one axis one way, one axis the other way,
Mm,
and it comes. I think it comes from Dungeons and Dragons.
mm,
And this guy, Doug Song, who used to be a hacker, he came up with this matrix for good, evil, lawful, unlawful. And I wish I should have kind of prepared a slide really, but we'll have to try and imagine it.
yeah.
And he sort of put points on the kind of matrix of where he thinks hackers would be. So, for example, if you think about a Western APT, so like I don't know, the NSA or GCHQ, they would be well, I suppose it's open for interpretation. They would be lawful and what's the other one? Chaos or evil. And you would argue that they probably wouldn't be. They would be on the good side, depending on how you
Yeah.
look at it. So they would be,
Yeah.
I don't know, somewhere there. But then you've got like all these new hackers. And what's interesting, I think, is if you plot their kind of position on that matrix over the last 10 years, more and more of them would lean very much away from the good and lawful and towards the chaotic and evil.
Mhm.
That's the point that I think he was making, and I absolutely agree with it.
I see, I see. And again, to perhaps spoil another point that you make in your book, I think you sort of argue that perhaps social media has played a role in that.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Could you talk
I,
about that?
yeah, I think so. I would love to show you another hacker logo, which is this one here. If Michael can show this. There we are. So these guys, this is the logo for LulzSec. So LulzSec, they were part of Anonymous, and I pinpoint the shift in the culture down to these guys. Um,
Mm,
I feel like this is the moment. So this is 2011 in the spring, no, summer, sorry, summer 2011. And Anonymous had been on a really high profile hacking spree for about a year or two, causing lots of problems for, Church of Scientology, Visa, MasterCard, going after kind of exposing corruption is what they would say. And a few of the
yeah.
guys from Anonymous, they sort of thought, wow, hang on, I love this kind of the headlines and the attention, but I don't really care about the moral stuff. I just want to have fun and hack whatever
Mm,
I want to hack. So they formed this group called LulzSec, and these guys were infamous. And they hacked anyone they could. They went after, all sorts of different organizations for kind of really weird reasons. Like, for example, they hacked Fox Network and released the data of 70,000 X Factor contestants just because they didn't like what someone on Fox said about their favorite rapper. Crazy stuff like that. And they defaced some news websites and planted fake news stories about, Tupac being alive and well, living on an island somewhere. Yeah, so it's the kind of their kids mucking around, really.
mhm,
And they had about a month of chaos and stuff. And what was so interesting about LulzSec was that they really perfected the art of becoming infamous online. It was all about Twitter for them and followers and retweets and news headlines. And they went from sort of nowhere to having 300,000 followers in just a few weeks, getting a ton of press attention. And what we know is that Twitter around this time was becoming very big. It was like going mainstream, and it really did change things. I would argue that it's
mhm.
Twitter that encouraged these kids in a sense, because before Twitter came along, being on a social network was about being social with your network, whereas Twitter said, no, 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 you don't need friends, you need followers. And you can do that by being infamous and edgy online. You don't need to be popular. And LulzSec, they really did prove that you can become a big name online by doing things like hacking and being sarcastic and bragging about it. And then, of course, after LulzSec, we saw that trend move. Even though those guys were all arrested and rounded up, and it was kids from the UK, Ireland, the US, and there's another one called AV Unit. No, he or she hasn't been caught, so who knows where they are? They could be watching right now, if
I
you are.
see.
Um, so they kind of all died away, but then the idea didn't die away because all these other gangs after them came along with their own names and logos: HTP, ISIS Gang, Lizard Squad. All of these groups came along. Team Crucifix or Die, that was another one. And one after the other, they tried to replicate what LulzSec had done. Um, and of course, the public were the victims of their success.
Yeah, I see. So, so I guess, I mean, uh, HTP and others hack the planet, I guess. That's the full name, right?
That's it, yeah.
So
Which has obviously
these,
it comes from that amazing film Hackers from 1995, I think it is, which is an awful film. It completely bombed, but it's so bad, it's so good, And there's a bit at the end of the film where a teenager gets arrested and he's in the police car and he hangs out his head out of the police car and he shouts, "Hack the planet!" And that's where the meme comes from, and that's where the gang got their name as well.
I see. These guys seem to also push sort of the reason for hacking even further than that, right? So because if I understood correctly, it's sort of uh, gangs like LulzSec did it for the lols, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it seems that I mean, from the story that you told about uh, Kivimaki, he was getting bitcoins, right?
Mhm.
And he was harming people as well, right? So,
Yeah, I think that's the other shift. So I think I would say that Twitter is one of the reasons why LulzSec and others were kind of encouraged. And then I
mm,
think the rise of Bitcoin is
mm,
the other really big thing that
I
we
see.
so HTP was sort of 2012, 2013. Lizard Squad was 2014, 2015. And then after them, of course, there was these other gangs like Lapsus, for example. And then where we are now with this group that's we all call Scattered Spider. It's all about you've still got that kind of online infamy and fame that they're hungry for, but also they've got the Bitcoin. They desperately want the Bitcoin because that obviously helps them be powerful and famous online as well if they're rich, doesn't it? So I think
I see.
Bitcoin has a lot to answer for. And as you say, we saw with HTP just the beginnings of when these gangs were becoming money orientated, and that got worse and worse as time went on. But I still think, when you look at the motivations of modern teenage hackers, I mean, I'm talking about the last couple of years now. Um, Money is as important as anarchy and chaos, I would say.
I see. I see. Um, I was fascinated by a part in your book that you were talking about. I mean, going back to Kivimaki, um, y- you were showing that he didn't really get the praise he wanted on the
Mm.
forums and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. Uh, could you talk about that a bit? So he didn't get enough praise, he didn't get enough money. So
Yeah, the
at the
the the
end,
Vestamo hack, the Vestamo hack from his perspective was a bit of a disaster, really. He as I said, he made a big mistake, which eventually had led police to finding who he was. But even before that, he didn't get paid by the CEO. He didn't get his extortion money, and even when he started posting those records on the dark net, yeah, he got a lot of criticism from even on nasty forums like Yalalta and what was the other one? Turilauta in Finland.
in
These are the
Finland.
kind of darknet websites like 4chan where you go to, to be edgy and to be nasty, and you're meant to get praise and comments back from people, but they were like, whoa, what are you doing, mate? You're like stealing people's medical records, mental health records. No,
So even
you've
for
got
them, this was a step too far.
exactly, yeah. And that was fascinating because as part of my research I got hold of the kind of the thread of conversation when he popped up as ransom man and started talking about this hack and posting these records. And I found it so interesting that people were saying, they were sending him, "Oh, go kill yourself," stuff like that. "Oh, this is wrong. What you're doing is low," that kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it all kind of backfired for him, really, because then of course he made that mistake and he sent those emails, and only a few of those people, those poor people that did actually pay, not many people actually sent the money. And then of course that mistake led to him being captured. And I've actually got here, if you want to see it, I've got his most wanted poster. So
Right.
this is Kivimaki. By this time I think he's about 24 years old. And when he made that big mistake, the Finnish police were like, "Oh, hang on a minute, we've got a treasure trove of data about this person who's only calling themselves ransom man at the moment, but let's see what we can get." And it led them down a path of, hang on a minute, this looks and sounds a lot like Julius Kivimaki, known as Julius Kivimaki, but his adult name is Alexandri. So they wanted to bring him in, and they wanted to arrest him and charge him, but they couldn't find him
Hmm.
because he was a jet setter by this time. He's a very wealthy Bitcoin, possibly millionaire, probably millionaire. And he
Hmm.
wasn't in Finland, and his lawyer didn't know where he was. So they put out a most wanted poster and a Europol a red notice to try and find him. And the beginning of the book, you'll remember, it begins with him being discovered by completely by mistake.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, accidental
that's
completely.
it.
Yes.
Yeah, the accidental arrest. Yeah, the first chapter. And they find him in Paris, living under false names, under false passports, and they eventually work out who he is, and then arrest him and take him to Finland, where he stood trial in the largest ever criminal case in Finnish history. So there you are. He looks kind of baby faced, doesn't he? Really. Um,
Yeah, that's
but yeah, the interesting because the name he was living under in Paris was Asan Ahmet, I think it was, which I think might be Turkish, or I can't remember what, maybe it might be Croatian name. Anyway, they were like, well, hang on a minute, he's 6'4" and he's blonde and blue eyes. This name doesn't quite. There's something about him, it didn't quite match. So then they searched, they found out that alias was probably linked to Kivimaki, and that's how they found out who they'd really knocked on the door of.
yeah, and I mean, it was interesting for me to read in the book that even, I mean, we are talking about this awful hack that Kivimaki did, but he seemed to have sort of some kind of moral compass, at least earlier in his teenagehood, right? So you mentioned a few comments from him, I guess, in one of the chat rooms, that he was not interested in harming people and those kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So something drove him towards this kind of life, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't really know what that was. The thing about Kivimaki is, and it's a sort of like a bit of a failing in the book really, is we never really find out that much about him, his private life. And I can say that without too much shame because actually not many other people have found out anything about him either.
Sure.
There was another, so this story is massive, and I'll tell you for why. Like, not only have I written the book on this, but someone else in Finland also wrote a shorter book, but they also wrote a book about it. They couldn't find anything out about him either.
Right.
He might be married, we don't know. He might have a kid, we don't know. He keeps his private life so secure, which is, of course, horrible when you think about what he's done to other people's private lives, where he's exposed those to the world on many other occasions, not just for Stamo, not just even the Christmas Day hacks. He's done it many times. He's gone after individuals, he's harassed them, that kind of thing. So, so I've written the book. Someone in Finland's also written a book. There's an HBO documentary series about him as well and about the Vestamo hack. There's a BBC Sounds podcast series about this as well. So, you know, this is a massive story, but no one really has been able to pinpoint what he is like as a person, which means we can't really answer those questions of kind of what turned him from being a sort of online delinquent, an arse, really, into being, you know, a serious cyber criminal. Because as you
And
say,
yeah,
you can look back at his chat logs in certain cases, and he used to have kind of a sort of like as you say, a moral compass or like an ethos of like, I don't really want to harm people. But that was when he was probably 13. And
mhm.
then you spend enough time in this community, it's toxic community, your attacks and what you're capable and prepared to do just change and they go up and up and up.
And sort of when did you interview him again?
Well,
When he
I
was,
interviewed him in 2014 when I was at Sky News and he was 17
I
and with the
see.
Lizard Squad. He'd already been very active for at least, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before that.
Sure.
And then I spoke to him again during the trial in Finland in
Oh, I see.
2024. However, he didn't want to do an interview, sadly. But we had like a text exchange, and we were going to meet up when I was in Finland for the trial, and it was all set up, and then it was stopped for some reason. And then he went missing again, which is hilarious. But you know that from the book. But he decided to just like go missing and not go to court, which is just very Julius Kivimaki.
I was just reminding people that they can ask questions, and I
Yes.
think we already have two questions, or
Oh, great.
three actually. So we can
I can't see those. So if you can,
prioritize those over mine. So
oh, here we go. Yeah.
one is, have you seen any of these gangs starting to use AI? And if not, what effect do you think this could have on hacking?
Well, I think the kind of the move towards AI enabled cyber attacks is obviously happening. There's no denying it. Really, we are seeing it on a scale now, which it's not just hype, and
Mhm.
that's the problem with cybersecurity. Is as you know, there's a lot of hype
Yeah.
with cybersecurity companies saying, "Oh, AI is going to kill us all," or the latest, and the sky is always falling in cyber, as you know. But we have seen enough evidence now that hackers are using it in various different ways. I don't think they're using it as much as the cybersecurity vendors will have us believe, but it is happening. And I think if you look at some of the really serious gangs, there's evidence that they are potentially using AI to, for example, craft phishing emails, create deep fakes of people, that kind of thing. The reason I don't think that there is much of this activity in the teenage hacking world is because these kids, they don't really need to.
Mm.
And you could argue that a lot of this cyber criminality doesn't really need AI because, of course, they are using really quite basic stuff. Uh, because organizations are getting it wrong in the basic way. If you look
Mhm.
at some of the attacks, for example, last year in the UK by these groups, the group called Scattered Spider, which is mostly kids, we think they picked up the phone and did a very, very simple password reset social engineering attack to get into the organizations. And then obviously move laterally from there and then install malware, that kind of thing. So the idea of kids jumping on the AI, the Gen AI bandwagon and suddenly being, super powered, I don't think we're going to see that yet because I just don't think that's in their playbook. They don't need it. They're doing very, very well without Gen AI. But then again, we do see a little bit. I wonder if I can show you something else. Um, I'll show you this image that I got from one of these hackers. If I just share my thing and Michael can show us. So where is it now? So that one. Okay, so I'll explain it. So this is a Gen AI image, obviously, that the Scattered Spider kids who hacked M&S and Co-op and Harrods last year, they sent me. So I was talking to these kids who they messaged me randomly on Telegram one afternoon during this spree of attacks, and they said, "Oh, did you know that Co-op is downplaying the attack? We actually have stolen a lot of customer data, and we did get in, and we did, cause a lot of damage, and they're playing it down."
Right.
And I had this fascinating conversation with them, where I obviously didn't believe them at first, and I didn't want to sort of start doing a story about something that was a lie to make them look good. But then they showed me evidence they did actually have millions of people's stolen data. So we ran a story on it, and Co-op admitted that okay, they were breached. But when I was in this conversation with these kids, they sent me this image, which I just have always thought just really tells us so much about these groups, these threat actors, which you just don't see in the kind of normal cybercrime world. Number one, two things, right? Number one, they are joining up now with ransomware groups. So this
Mhm.
one they've joined up with for the last wave of attacks is called Dragon Force. So ransomware as a service group, as you know, is like where anyone can become an affiliate. If I hack into a place, let's say I hacked into York University, I would I would become an affiliate with Dragon Force, and I would say, look, I've got access. I want to use your malware and your extortion portal. And then they say, yeah, come on in, you can be an affiliate. I take 70% of the ransom and they get 30% or 20%, 80%, whatever the deal is. So they're
Right.
using Dragon Force now, which means that they're joining up. So their skills are not malware and they're not like super duper master skilled hackers. They're social engineers and they go the extra mile in terms of they don't care about the trouble they get into. So they can bring their skill set, join up with the Russian speaking Dragon Force style ransomware as a service ecosystem, and together they can cause some damage. The second thing I love about this image and what it tells us is they're having a great time. They've loaded
Mhm.
up a Gen AI tool and they've made that image because they're having a wonderful time. They feel powerful.
I
They are
see.
the dragon.
I see. I see.
And you don't get that, do you? In normal cybercrime, it's like very cut and dry. You get in, you get paid, you get out. Whereas
Yeah,
these kids, they're very different threat actors.
I see. I see. Um, we've got a few questions coming in, so I'll read the next one.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure if you want to reveal this, but what was the mistake that Kivimaki made that led the police to him?
Well, so it's in chapter 3 or 4 of the book, but I don't mind telling you. So it's what he did was, remember I mentioned that every day for 3 days he uploaded 100 records to try and turn the screw on Vestamo and put pressure on him to pay. He accidentally, instead of uploading 100 records on day 4, he uploaded all the records. So he gave away the entire data set that he was meant to be eking out and using as a tool. But he also accidentally uploaded his home directory. So I liken it to like you're meant to send one email and you accidentally send your whole inbox to someone. So it was a treasure trove. The cops, they couldn't believe their luck really, and that gave them enough breadcrumbs to reach all the way back to back to Kivimaki.
Yeah, thanks for that. Um,
I've spoiled the book now. There's no point in buying it.
it's,
Don't bother.
it's a great book. You should you should read it. Uh, right. Steve asks. if the hackers can hack our system, can we not develop a system whereby we can back backtrack them? I guess that's the
Oh,
question.
so find them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's tough. Cybercrime is, one of the hardest beats if you're a cop, because of course you can hide behind aliases. You can use VPNs, virtual private networks, to disguise where you're logging into places from. You can you can use mixers to mix the Bitcoin that you steal from places. So the idea is that if I have 100 Bitcoin, I can't get my victim to send me 100 Bitcoin on my account and then go to Binance and cash out, because Binance or Coinbase, they can just get subpoenaed by the police, and the police will be like, "Oh, it's Joe Tidy, yeah, go and arrest him." Whereas if you've got a mixer, you can get lots of people putting their Bitcoin into one place, mixing it all up, and then giving you, almost all of it back. Um, and there's just so many tools for cyber criminals. It's really, really hard for the police to find them. But the great thing about these groups is, these team gangs, is because of their bragging online and because of their kind of love of chaos, they are easier to find than the others. And they're quite often English speaking, therefore gettable, because they're probably and often in English speaking countries. Whereas a lot of cybercrime, the vast majority of cybercrime, is in countries like, for example, Russia, where we just can't get to these individuals.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that you were saying in the book that even like Kivimaki was his messages on these forums were all in English, right? So even a Finnish
Yeah,
guy, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. I mean, a lot of the cybercrime is, I would probably argue that most cybercrime is conducted, especially if you look at the ransomware groups, they're all Russian speaking.
Mhm.
That's the predominant language they use. But then there's this other large and sadly growing subset of cybercriminality, which is English speaking.
I see. Right. Next question is from Zoe, and the question is, first, thanks so much. This has been fascinating. I was
Thank
wondering
you.
how do you feel incel culture might be influencing hacking groups and hacking culture? This was actually similar to a question that I had because I was I was fascinated by reading this sentence in your book saying, "I have never met a female cyber criminal," which
True.
was very
It's
interesting.
true. Yeah, yeah. I'm yet to meet a female. Obviously, you don't know who you're talking to sometimes. So maybe perhaps I have spoken to a female cyber criminal, but I don't think so. I honestly don't think I have, because uh, in order to be a cyber criminal, you have to be in this community, and the community is very anti girls and women. It's a very toxic, nasty place, which is not welcoming for females. And that's been the case for a long time. If you look at 4chan, that kind of thing, there is a kind of an instant animosity and sexualization of an online person if they admit to or claim to be a woman, and there are definite sort of incel vibes in this culture as well. There's a lot of, and you saw this in the book with Kivimaki, with Mer Islam, and I'm trying to think of some other names. Oh, there was that guy from Lizard Squad. I forget his tagline. He was Canadian. Anyways, there's another
Who
individual.
pretended to be a female.
No, that was a different one. I'm
Okay.
thinking about the guys that we know have harassed and gone after girls who
Mm.
won't be their girlfriend anymore,
Oh, yes.
that kind of thing. And it happens time and time again. And we see swatting and we see harassment and doxing. It is a nasty place for girls. And what's funny is I get this thing sometimes when I talk about this where people are like, "Oh, why aren't there girls in this?" And I say, "Well, hang on a minute, that's wrong. Like, isn't it good that girls aren't doing this? We don't want equality in cybercrime. We don't want girls to be to be cyber criminals as well." That's one of that's quite funny, that argument.
I see. Um, all right. Next question is from Rod Moody. The question is, where is this infamous guy now? Is he in prison? And what sentence did he get?
Yeah, sorry, we didn't talk about that, did we? Yeah, great question. Yeah, so he was convicted in 2024, and he was convicted of all the crimes. So he did the hack, he did the blackmail, he did the extortion, he sent those emails, And the Finnish justice system is famously lenient, and they gave him 6 years and 4 months, I think it was.
Mm.
So he served only about, I think he only served about 2.5 years. So he's already out. Um, because of course he did enough time when he was arrested in Paris and he was held all that time because he was a flight risk, obviously. But what is fascinating about this is, what is it now? 2 months ago, he appealed his conviction because he's maintained his innocence. He doesn't. He says he didn't do it.
Right.
So he appealed his conviction, but he lost. And not only did he lose, they increased his sentence. So the prosecution, all the court, what they call the Crown, they also appealed, and the Crown's case was won. So he got given another few months on his sentence. And what's brilliant is they can't find him. They don't know where he is. So they're
I
trying
see.
to bring him back to Finland to serve those extra few months, and they don't know where he is.
Just hoping for another accidental arrest, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So Peter C asks, what about political hacking? Is this mainly due to national countries, or haven't they moved into this area? I guess, I guess
Nation
this
state.
is, yeah, nation state
Yeah.
actors. Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't think so. And I have had this question before. I think there's a fear that some of these kids might end up, hacking for an adversary country, or even for the UK or the US against enemies. And I don't think so, because of the things we've already talked about. Because if you think about what the drivers are here, the drivers are, can I get rich? Can I become infamous online? And can I cause chaos, and can I enjoy myself by harming people digitally? And none of that really goes along with your nation state hacking, because if you're hacking for a country, you have to have a kind of geopolitical bent, and you have to have a kind of like a drive to do what's right for your nation, that kind of thing. So whether it's official nation state hacking or hacktivism, which is unofficial sort of vigilante hacking, I haven't seen much crossover really. Um,
With
the
this teenage world,
No, I don't think so. I have seen a little bit of crossover with kind of like the general cybercrime world. I've been speaking to a guy who is a Russian cybercriminal who is also a Russian hacktivist. And there's a little bit of crossover there. But of course, if you can make money from your hack, then you would do that instead of making a geopolitical point. Do you see what I
Sure.
mean? So if you've got into a network, it's a very different mindset than kind of nation state hacking. So I don't think we have seen that yet. No.
Right. Well, we have still four questions left.
Thank you for the questions. We're
So
delighted.
yeah, yeah, these are very, very good questions. Next one is from an anonymous attendee.
Oh,
Such a great
the AV
conversation.
unit.
Such a great conversation. Do you think we can implement anything into the educational system to prevent cyber hacking?
Yes. I don't know what, but yes. This is like the $1 million question, isn't it? How do we stop? I call it a cycle because I think it is a cycle. I think that you have moments where these gangs kind of rise up and then they go away and they get arrested and more different ones come up. And how do we stop that? And I think in kind of the last chapter of my book, towards the end, I ask lots of people in the story, how do you think we should solve this problem? And education comes up quite a lot because
Mhm.
a lot of these kids, they are nice kids. They would never do bad things that they know to be bad. So, for example, there's a hacker that I talk about quite a lot in the book called Eric Taylor, who was known as Cosmo the God, and he carried out some enormous cyber attacks, insane social engineering. Really, very. I don't want to. You can't be impressed, but it is quite impressive. Some of the stuff that he did, and he caused a huge amount of digital distress to lots and lots of companies, organizations, and individuals. But when he was in lots and lots of trouble with the police, I remember that someone from Wired went to interview him. I don't know why he did the interview, but he did. And the person from Wired did this kind of profile about this teenage hacker who's in so much trouble with the police. He's got his court case pending, and the reporter goes to talk to the grandma, who is Eric Taylor's guardian. And I'll never forget. I think this summarizes it brilliantly. The reporter says to the grandma, "What do you think about Eric's hacking? He's in a lot of trouble, isn't he, with the police? What do you think about it?" And she says, "It's nonsense. Eric's a good boy. He
Mm.
never leaves his bedroom." And it's that kind of educational thing, both on the parent side and on the perpetrator side, where this idea that, if you're in your bedroom online, no one's getting hurt. Not true.
Yeah, I see.
Absolutely not true. So I think education, yes, school and in the kind of with the kids and also the parents is really important.
Mhm. Next one, we go through this, I guess, a bit more quickly. Three questions remaining. What do you think attracts teenagers to cyber hacking?
I think it always starts, I know it always starts with gaming. There is this pathway that we see, which is undeniable. You have a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy, and it is normally always boys, obsessed with gaming. Then they want to be the best at gaming. So they try and learn how to do better and better, maybe start doing some cheating, maybe start doing some hacking in order to make the games better so they can beat their mates. And then they find themselves on forums where there's less game chat and more hacking chat. And then suddenly this whole world of cyber opens up to them. And it's very attractive. I mean, these are very online kids who are having a really good time, and quite often that kind of cyber delinquency can turn to cybercrime, and then as soon as you start introducing money, it can go serious.
Yeah, thanks for that. We are sort of running out of time. So, Peter, I hope you don't mind if I give priority to a question from another one of our attendees. Linda asks, with hacking, are individuals able to take any preventative measures?
Yes. So if you are an individual or an organization that wants to be better prepared, the basics, got to do the basics. And I'm sure, Sia, you could answer this question way better than me, but it's stuff like don't use the same password across multiple services. Use a complex password system, ideally with a password manager, an app that stores all your complex passwords and gives you complex passwords. Make sure your software is up to date. And I'm afraid it sounds awful, but like be suspicious and be paranoid of everything. I hate it. I hate that we have to say it, but that's life now, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Is there
Um,
anything else you'd add?
no, I think you got the a good list of the basics. Yeah, yeah. Work with cybersecurity specialists. I
Yeah,
guess that's the other thing.
yeah.
Um, yeah, some companies think of cybersecurity as sort of as an afterthought, so that
Mm.
they need to get sort of out of that mindset. Um, right. Next one. Do we have time? I
Yeah,
guess we still have like three
we've got
minutes.
2 minutes.
Yeah. So instead of using, so it's from Steve. Instead of using software to track the hackers, could we implement a signal into the hardware that would show where every unit is located?
Well, you could. I'm sure you'd have a good answer on this as well, Sia, but um, it's that thing of like privacy versus security.
Yeah.
There is a lot we could do. We could put laws in that make people, for example, you have to have a named account with an address and every phone number has to be linked to an individual. But where do we draw the line? Are we a bit too China-like if we go in that direction, or
Yeah.
Russia in the way that they implement online safety? So it's a very difficult one, isn't it, between privacy and security? It's an age-old problem, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, and um, the the impression I got from reading your book is that you also subscribe to this idea that this is a societal problem rather than a technical problem, right? Is
I think
that
so.
is that a fair impression?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, you can do all the technical things that you want, but if there's anything that we've learned about hacking and about these groups is that they are extremely creative and they'll find ways around everything.
Sure.
Look at the ban on porn websites in this country. It's not really working because, of course, VPNs and workarounds are happening. Technical solutions will only get you so far, I think.
Yeah. Um, Next question, I guess we can do this very quickly. These two last two questions. Do you think AI is going to play a big part in tracking down cybercrime?
I think so. I think that police will be harnessing AI big time, and I think it could be a big win for the defenders as well as the attackers. My kind of glass half full is that it will be in the long term very good for defenders.
Sure. And then coming back to Peter's question, as the last question, have you established any respect so that hackers were willing to speak to you?
I think so. Yeah, and not to boast too much, but I think I do have a pretty steady stream of these individuals coming to me with stories and ideas and tips and things, and I deliberately have made myself available to them because although it opens me up to risk. And the BBC to risk as well. But the information security team at the BBC do not like me. I'm a problem for them. I'm joking. They're very nice and we get along very well. But I am a difficult customer for them. But I would argue, and I maintain this, that being out there and open to these individuals is better for everyone because we get information from them. And quite often, sadly, the best information you can get about a cyber attack doesn't come from the victims because they lawyer up and then they're not allowed to say anything and it's corpo speak and you never actually find out what's going on. Whereas sometimes the threat actors, they have their own reasons, but when they reach out, they do give you good information about what's actually happening.
Yeah, and that helps, I guess, to understand this
Yeah,
problem, this societal problem, and hopefully come up with good solutions for this, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, I think so.
Um, Thank you very much, Joe. This
Thank
was,
you.
I mean, we ran out of time. We ran over time. So this was fascinating and thought-provoking. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed a lot. I hope the audience did as well. And thanks for answering all of these questions. And thanks to the audience for providing very interesting questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
Um,
coming. Yeah.